Welcome to today's presentation. Today, I'll be going over Administrative Guide Procedure 33109, Police Officer / Detective Specialist Monthly Quarterly Performance Review and Rating System. Now, the Police Officer Detective Specialist Monthly Quarterly Performance Review utilizes the Officer Profile Report, and it measures the performance levels of uniformed members of the service performing enforcement functions. That's right. This procedure applies to officers who perform enforcement functions. Specifically, police officer detective specialists assigned to non-investigative bureaus performing enforcement functions will be assessed monthly, utilizing the Officer Profile Report, and evaluated quarterly using the supervisor's quarterly evaluation. So, they give you examples of command that are non-investigatory bureaus, precincts, police service areas, trans districts, strategic response groups. Those are the commands that will follow this procedure, and they are going to be assessed monthly on the Officer Profile Report, and they're going to be evaluated quarterly on the supervisor's quarterly evaluation. Now, there are certain assignments within these commands that will not be assessed on the Officer Profile Report and the supervisor's quarterly evaluation. A uniformed member of service whose duties do not involve enforcement activity will not prepare the Officer Profile Report nor be evaluated quarterly using the supervisor's quarterly evaluation. Such positions include, I have a little acronym here.
CACA. CACA
are the individuals who are assigned to the command that normally have to fill out that Officer Profile Report and be evaluated on the supervisor's quarterly evaluation, but not CCAT persons. Crime Prevention Coordinator. That is a position that does not have to fill out that Officer Profile Report and supervisor's quarterly evaluation.
Administrative Quality of Life Officer, Community Affairs Officer, Auxiliary Police Coordinator.
4 specific positions that do not get evaluated on the supervisor's quarterly evaluation, and they do not have to prepare that Officer Profile Report prior promotional exam question. So now the procedure begins. When preparing a monthly quarterly performance review of a police officer and detective specialist, utilizing the police officer detective specialist monthly quarterly performance review, that uniformed member of the service will access the performance evaluation system and print out a hard copy of the Officer Profile Report at the conclusion of each month. So when January ends, January is concluded, you, the uniformed member of service, will print out this Officer Profile Report. The end of February, you print out the Officer Profile Report. And again, that's at the conclusion of each month. Then they explain to us what information is found on the Officer Profile Report. The uniformed member of service printed it out at the conclusion of the month, and what does it include? The Officer Profile Report is an electronic form that is generated in the performance evaluation system, which compiles data from numerous department databases to provide an accurate account of the uniformed member of service's performance. It will include statistical data that is unique to the precinct and platoon to which the reporting member is assigned. It is specific to that officer's platoon, and it will include the 7 major crimes. It will include top 911 locations. It will include top collision locations. And again, when the officer prints it out, all this information is automatically entered on that Officer Profile Report. Remember, it is unique to both the precinct and that officer's platoon. And they tell you, in addition to that information found on the Officer Profile Report, other pieces of information will be on the officer profile report. The officer profile report will contain information from the officer self-report form and the supervisor's feedback forms when submitted. So, in addition to the 7 major crimes, in addition to the top collision locations, in addition to those 911 locations, you will have on that officer profile report the officer self-report forms. Now, in the additional data statement, they tell you what the officer's self-report form will include, because an officer prepares an officer self-reporting form for himself when he takes notable actions that he believes is positive. And in addition to the information from the officer self-report forms, the supervisor's feedback forms will also be included on the officer profile report. And again, in the additional data statement, it says 3 types of information can be entered on a supervisor's feedback forms about an officer by a supervisor. That would include any commendable actions the officers took. So the supervisor could see him take a commendable action and he could document it on the supervisor's feedback form. Any area that needs improvement, he sees a weakness with that officer, he could document it on that supervisor's feedback form. And he could also document minor violations. So all the information from the officer self-report form and all the information from the supervisor's feedback forms that are prepared for that officer will be found on that officer profile report. Now, that uniform member of service, he printed it out at the conclusion of the month, and he will review and have to submit that officer profile report to the designated supervisor for review by the 2nd day following the month. Now, please be aware, we're going to be talking about all different time frames on when the uniform member of service must submit forms, the designated supervisor must submit forms, the platoon commander, the ops coordinator. Be careful of these times. The uniform member of service printed out at the conclusion of the month, he's got to review it and submit it to his designated supervisor by the 2nd day of the following month. So when January is done, he prints it out, and he has to review and submit it to his designated supervisor by the 2nd day in February. Now, understand who the designated supervisor is. If I work midnights, I'm in patrol squad A1, well, my designated supervisor is patrol squad A1's supervisor. And that's who I'll have to submit it to. You will submit that report prior to leave, or if not possible, without delay, upon return from duty if scheduled for vacation or other leave. Yeah, you're going to be out a week. Try to hand it in before you leave. But if you can't, well, you should do it immediately upon return. And inform the designated supervisor of any excessive time off patrol for the reported month due to vacation, sick, administrative duties, details, etc. So when you review and submit it to your designated supervisor, let them know, hey, listen, I got stuck on details for 10 days of the whole entire month. They want you to tell that designated supervisor of that excessive time off patrol. And that designated supervisor or another supervisor may print the officer profile report for the uniform member service concerned if the member is unavailable for an extended period of time due to vacation or other leave. Maybe the officer on vacation for a few weeks. Well, he's not going to wait for him to get back from vacation after having 2 or 3 weeks off so that designated supervisor or other supervisor can print it out for him. And there it is, the duties of the uniform member of service. Now we got to talk about that designated supervisor. He is required to review the member's officer profile report. He received it from that uniform member of service by the 2nd in the month. Now he reviews it. He evaluates the uniform member service performance in proactively addressing community concerns, and he will assess the quality and caliber of the members' efforts by carefully reviewing activity, including the supervisor's feedback forms and the officer's self-reporting forms. Yeah, you're looking at it and reviewing his activity. Now be careful of the next point. It's the designated supervisor's responsibility to determine the accuracy, validity, and integrity of the officer's self-reporting forms. I already said that the officer will prepare an officer's self-report forms for any notable actions he takes that he considers positive. Well, what the designated supervisor's job is to make sure it's true. Okay, he's going to make sure that whatever the officer wrote on that officer's self-reporting form is accurate, and it is true. That designated supervisor will provide positive feedback and comments for proactive, quality activity. Yeah, you're going to say, good job, officer. You did a good job. You wrote 25 summonses for the month. And you will compare the member's current monthly performance to other members with similar duties by referring to the officer comparison page of the officer profile report. They want you to compare activity of one officer to another officer. But they want you to make sure that they perform similar duties. You want to compare an officer in one sector car with an officer in another sector car. They perform the same duties, and you should compare their activity. You don't want to compare an officer in a sector car with an officer in a specialty unit. You also provide guidance and direction for improvement and conduct regular follow-ups when a deficiency is identified. So it's not only are you going to discuss the good things the officer did, you also discuss the bad things the officer was doing. So when you find a deficiency, you're going to give him guidance and direction. Officer, you didn't write any summonses this month. And you will take appropriate steps to improve the uniform member's performance. Officer, you need to write summonses. I would like you to write these summonses in this location. That's where we need enforcement activity. You provide them guidance. These steps included but not limited to assisting UMWest in identifying the conditions to be addressed. Great. Identify a weakness. You provide him direction and guidance in correcting that weakness. But I got a pop quiz for you. If the member fails to improve performance, you told him that he was weak in this area. You directed him on what he needed to do. You provided him the guidance on the activity that you wanted to see. And he fails to improve performance after you instructed him. That designated supervisor is required to confer with whom? Who will that designated supervisor confer with regarding him failing to improve performance? Boom! If the member fails to improve performance, he's going to confer with the lieutenant, the platoon commander / special operations lieutenant, or the next higher supervisor. Lieutenant, Officer Yanisik, he was deficient in summonses. I provided him guidance on how many summonses to write and where to write the summonses and what to write summonses for, and he failed to improve his performance after I directed him and provided him the guidance. You tell the lieutenant on him. Now, that designated supervisor will deliver the completed officer profile report to the platoon commander or reviewer by the 5th day following the month. By the 5th day following the month. We know the uniform member of service. He's required to submit the officer profile report to the designated supervisor by the 2nd day following the month. Now that designated supervisor has to submit that officer profile report after he signs it. And he is going to deliver to his boss, the platoon commander or other reviewer, by the 5th day following the month. Got to be careful about the specific intervals that we're required to submit these forms. Now we're going to talk about some lieutenant's duties. Yes, if you're studying for the sergeant's exam, you do not need to know this. But I recommend you listen to this part of the procedure so you better understand the procedure as a whole. And if you're starting for lieutenant, an absolutely essential duty here. That platoon commander or the reviewer, he just received the officer profile report. He's required to review and sign off on that officer profile report, and then he's got to submit it to somebody. He, the lieutenant, the platoon commander, or the reviewer, submits it to another lieutenant. He's going to forward the completed officer profile report to the operations coordinator by the 7th day of the month for filing. So that platoon commander, he submitted it to the ops coordinator by the 7th. Okay, so now, the ops coordinator, another lieutenant's duty. Sergeant's exam, be aware you don't need to know this duty. But understand, if you're studying for the lieutenant's accountant exam, you got to know when the ops coordinator receives those officer profile reports, what does he do? He files them. Does he have to do anything else with the officer profile reports? Nope, he just files them. Is there a due date he's got to file it by? No. Just file them. You're the ops coordinator, file them. Officer profile reports, ops coordinator, he just files them. Now, let's review about handing in that officer profile report. Because that police officer / detective specialist, the uniformed member of service, he is going to be required to submit that officer profile report to his designated supervisor by the 2nd day. Then the designated supervisor, he's going to have to deliver that officer profile report to the platoon commander or the reviewer by the 5th day. And then that platoon commander or the reviewer, he's going to have to forward that officer profile report to the ops coordinator by the 7th day. And then that ops coordinator will just have to file that officer profile report. No due date. Make sure you're very familiar with this little flow chart. And then we have one commanding officer duty. Sergeant's exam, lieutenant's exam, you don't have to know this one duty right here. The commanding officer, what is his responsibility regarding that officer profile report? He will log into the performance evaluation system periodically and review the completed officer profile report. How often does the commanding officer do this? Periodically. Periodically, he reviews those completed officer profile reports. Great. We are done with the monthly assessments. Now we got to talk about quarterlies. And each January, April, July, and October, that designated supervisor, the midnight patrol squad supervisor, when he received that officer profile report from Officer Yanisik, who's assigned to Squad A1, he will log in to the performance evaluation system to conduct the supervisor's quarterly evaluation within 7 days following the quarter for which the review is due. And he will review activity for all 3 months of the quarter. So, January, February, March, he is required to log in and review all the activity by April 7th. April, May, and June, he's going to review those 3 months, and he's got to review it by July 7th. July, August, and September, he's going to review those 3 months by October 7th. October, November, December, he's got to review those 3 months by January 7th. Now, that designated supervisor, he's going to rate that uniformed member of service in each of 12 performance areas and be guided by instructions on the electronic form. That's right. The quarterly supervisor's evaluation have 12 performance areas. Now, the next point is extremely important. Documentation is mandatory for any rating above or below meet standards. That's right. And let's read it and then I'll explain it. Examples of documentation include, but not limited to, the supervisor's feedback forms, officer self-reporting forms, and content listed on the officer profile report. Supervisor's feedback forms, officer self-reporting forms, and above average activity on the officer profile report are to be considered to support rating criteria. If you want to give Officer Yanisic an above standards evaluation regarding his activity, you got to be able to point to, hey, look, on the officer profile report, he made 4 felony arrests and wrote 50 summonses. Wow. You could point to that, and that's why you could give him above meet standards. And if you want to give him below meet standards, well, you want to give him below meet standards of his activity, you got to be able to point to the officer profile report and say, look, he didn't write any summons and made no arrests. Below standards. You got to point to something on that officer profile report to back up your above or below meet standards designation. After you have evaluated this officer in those 12 performance areas, will the system automatically generate you a number? Performance evaluation system in the department intranet will automatically calculate members' rating as a score out of 100 points based on the rating. Based on what you enter in those 12 performance areas, it's going to spit out a number, up to 100. Now, they also want you to document good things and bad things the officer did. And I like it, they provided some examples here. That designated supervisor, in the supervisory comment section of the supervisor's quarterly evaluation, will note the following. Any outstanding action or achievement, good things, and any deficiencies or areas that need improvement, bad things. They want you to document that in the supervisory comment section. And I like it because they provide us with examples of good and bad things. What are some outstanding actions and achievement? Well, they include bribery arrests, pattern robbery arrest, or other action which significantly impacts on crime or issues of community concern. Okay, those are the good things they want you to document under the supervisory comments. And also, under the bad things, deficiencies, areas that needs improvement, like chronic sick, subject to disciplinary action, or placed on performance monitoring. Now, another very important point. That designated supervisor will discuss the ratee's supervised quarterly evaluation with the platoon commander or the reviewer. Hey, Lieutenant, I'm evaluating Officer Yanisic, and this is what I'm looking to give him on his evaluation. Maybe the officer is below standards. And the lieutenant will say, okay, let's discuss it. Yeah, he's below standards because of this, this, and this. You're supposed to discuss it with the lieutenant before you go sit down with the officer. You will then sign off on the complete evaluation. Discuss it with the lieutenant first, then sign off on it. Okay, you want him, get him to agree with what you're going to evaluate the member, because if he doesn't agree, he's not going to sign off on it, and you're going to have to do it over again, which you'll see in a second. After you sat down with that platoon commander or the reviewer, you will interview the member in a private setting and discuss all performance. Now you sit down with the officer and say, Officer Yanisic, we're giving you below standards, and this is why. Explain it. Or you're giving above standards, and this is why. You will then review the evaluation with the member and forward the evaluation to platoon commander or other reviewer by the 7th day of the month following reporting period. And this is done for quarterlies. That quarterly evaluation is forwarded to the lieutenant, to the platoon commander or other reviewer by the 7th. I repeat, by the 7th day of the month. Now, we discussed this when we discussed the monthly assessment. If a member consistently fails to perform at satisfactory levels the supervisor will confer with the platoon commander or the next higher level supervisor regarding referring the member to performance monitoring. You see, you identify a weakness, you instruct the member, and hopefully he will improve his performance in that area. See, you, the designated supervisor, have to tell the lieutenant when he consistently fails to perform at satisfactory levels. Yes, you identify a weakness, discuss it, hopefully he correct that weakness. But if he consistently fails to perform at satisfactory levels, Lieutenant, platoon commander, guess what? Yanisek keeps failing to perform at satisfactory levels. And then they slip in a quick captain's duty. Each quarter, the commanding officer will review all underperforming members and notify the next higher commander in writing of actions taken and or recommended. And we're going to discuss a lot more duties of that commanding officer in a few minutes. Okay, now we're going to talk about a lieutenant. Okay, so sergeant, no, you don't need to know this point, but I would tell you to listen to it so you better understand how it works after you submitted it to lieutenant by the 7th. That platoon commander or other reviewer will log into the performance evaluation system to review the supervisor's quarterly evaluation. Yeah, and it shouldn't be a surprise to this lieutenant because that platoon commander and that designated supervisor sat down and discussed it before the designated supervisor even signed off on it. So now when he gets it, he should very simply, oh yeah, I know Yanisek, we were going to give him below standards. And if he concurs with it, he signs off on it and does any comments. And that's what should always happen. Why? Because you discussed this with the lieutenant. So when the lieutenant gets there, should be no surprises. But what happens if the platoon commander, that lieutenant, disagrees with the rater's evaluation? Maybe the designated supervisor discussed with the platoon commander to give Yanisek below standards. And then, during the interview, the officer pointed out a couple points, and he changed the rating to meet standards. And now the lieutenant gets in and says, wait a minute, I discussed this. We would give him below standards, and you gave him meet standards. You don't agree with it. That lieutenant, that platoon commander of the review will confer with the rater and direct the rater to reevaluate performance based on the conferral and review of activity. Hey, redo this. Based on his activity, he is not meeting standards. He's below standards. So you're going to give it back to him to do it over again. But what happens if that sergeant brings back you Yanisek's evaluation and you still don't agree with it? In that scenario, if you still don't agree, you sign and enter the reasons for disagreement in the comments. Now you're gonna write in it, I disagree with this and the reason why I disagree with it. And I will have to prepare a separate evaluation if appropriate. So I'm gonna have to do a separate evaluation because he didn't do what we agreed upon. Now, supervisor's quarterly evaluation rating score will not be finalized until the platoon commander of the reviewer reviews and concurs with the rating. See that? The officer may have been rated meet standards, but it's not final until the lieutenant signs off on it. Supervisor's quarterly evaluations may be appealed to the next higher ranking supervisor, but in all cases, the member's commanding officer and the rank of captain or above will make the final determination. And that platoon commander or the reviewer will deliver the printed copy of the supervisor's quarterly evaluation to the operations coordinator by what day? By the 10th day of the month following the reporting period. By the 10th day. We know the designated supervisor submitted the quarterly to the platoon commander by the 7th. Now we have the platoon commander submitting the supervised quarterly evaluation to the ops coordinator by the 10th. And then the operations coordinator gets it. Well, what does he got to do with it? He's going to ensure that that supervised quarterly evaluation are finalized by the 15th day of the month following the reporting period. He's going to make sure they're finalized by the 15th. So, here it is. Flow chart again, but now this flow chart is dealing with the supervised quarterly evaluations. The first one, we dealt with the officer profile report. Now, we're dealing with a flow chart regarding the supervisor's quarterly evaluations. At the end of each quarter, that designated supervisor, he will forward that supervised quarterly evaluation to the platoon commander or the reviewer by the 7th day. Then, that platoon commander or the reviewer will deliver that supervised quarterly evaluation to the ops coordinator by the 10th day. And the ops coordinator, he's going to be required to ensure they're finalized by the 15th day. Know your dates. Know the first flow chart and the second flow chart. And now we have some duties of the commanding officer. So it's specifically for a captain's exam. So if you're studying for sergeant lieutenant, again, just listen to it. You won't hear questions on it. You will not get questions on it, but it'll give you a better understanding of the procedure. Because now the commanding officer, he's required to access the performance evaluation system and review the supervisor's quarterly evaluations. Okay, he reviews them, but some of them, he's going to be required to personally conduct a performance interview. When will the commanding officer personally conduct a performance interview? For those members who receive a numerical score of 67 or lower out of 100 for any quarter. Any quarter, somebody got a 67 or lower, a 67 or lower, that commanding officer personally will conduct a performance interview. That's right. The commanding officer, again, will personally conduct a performance interview if they get a 67 or lower for any quarter. And during that interview, the commanding officer will inform the member that continued below standards performance will, absent mitigating circumstances, result in the member being placed on performance monitoring and possible imposition of sanctions by the personnel review board concerned. You provide direction and or take necessary corrective action to improve the member's performance, and you will record and file the results of the interview. When is this done? When that member gets 67 or lower for any quarter. But if it happens more than one quarter in a year, no more just have to personally do a performance interview. Now you got to put it in writing. That commanding officer will notify the next higher command in writing, the next higher command for a precinct to patrol borough. You are going to notify the next higher command in writing of UMOS who received a score of a 67 or lower for any 2 quarters within a 1 year period. So if they get a 67 or lower in 82 quarters in a 1 year period, then it's the commanding officer's job to notify the next higher command in writing. Okay, don't mix up the 67 or lower for 1 quarter with the 67 or lower for 2 quarters in a 1 year period, and your responsibilities for each. And now we just have to finish off with a few additional data statements. And we already spoke about this officer self-reporting forms. The officer self-reporting form can be accessed on the member's department mobile phone through the CRAFT application and will allow a uniformed member service to document notable actions that they consider to be positive. That's right. He's going to give himself a data boy and fill out the officer self-reporting form to indicate what he did, the good thing he did. And they give examples, achievements in crime prevention, problem solving, community engagement, etc. So he gets to pat himself on the back, preparing his form. And we know when he prepares the officer self-reporting form, will that information be automatically entered on the officer profile report? It will be. So that when he's being evaluated, the supervisor will know the good thing that he did. And we spoke about this before. The supervisor's feedback form can be accessed on the supervisor's department mobile phone through the CRAFT application and will allow a supervisor to highlight commendable action by that uniformed member of service. So the supervisor sees somebody taking a commendable action, he could prepare the supervised feedback form to indicate it. So that way, that good thing he did will be indicated on his officer profile report. But it's not just for good things. Examples, supervisor observes, becomes aware of an exceptional community interaction, UMOS makes an arrest that closes the precinct pattern, etc. But here it is, the bad things. This form will also allow supervisors to note areas that may need improvement and indicate what actions were taken to address the deficiency. So you could document bad things he did too, and the action you took to correct those deficiencies. And not only that, in addition, the minor violations of department regulations committed by a uniformed member service can be documented using the form. So if somebody's late for roll call, you could document it on this supervisor's feedback form so that his supervisor, his designated supervisor, will see that when he is performing those monthly assessments and those quarterly evaluations. And this form can also be completed by supervisors for UMOS outside their command. Example, UMOS assigned supervisors on details. So somebody's off post when you're assigned to a detail of 1 and 8 at the Thanksgiving Day Parade, can't find them for half the tour. Well, you could document that on the supervisor's feedback form, even though he may be assigned to another command. And lastly, we finish off with captain's duty. Commanding officers will be responsible for determining performance standards within their respective commands and resolving all issues within their command relative to the monthly performance review. Precinct PSAs and district commanding officers will also review and direct conditions to be addressed consistent with applicable crime control strategies and areas of community concern. And there it is. 330-109, Police Officer Detective Specialist, Monthly Quarterly Performance Review and Rating System.
This procedure was effective on October 24th of 2025, and it was last revised by Revision Order Number 107 of 2025.
My name is Mike Yanisic. You have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email me at mike@elitestrategictraining.com, or you can email my son, Connor at elitestrategictraining.com. Or call us at 516-761-9101. Keep studying and stay focused and motivated. Until next time.